Hey, question for you. Did you enjoy nap time as a kid? Remember when either your parents or teachers at maybe preschool or kindergarten would force you to go down for a nap? I know for me, I never wanted to. I was very rebellious about nap times, even bedtimes. And I was just wondering today, how come when we were kids, we were forced to take naps, but we didn't want to? And now as adults, most of us wish we could take naps, but nobody lets us. We don't get the opportunity to do it. Well, what if I told you that taking a nap is one of the godliest things you can do? That this idea of rest is actually one of the most important parts of your spiritual journey and just your life as a human being. I want to talk about rest for a minute with you. It's actually one of my favorite things to talk on. And by the end, I promise I'll give you permission, all right, to go rest, to go take a nap. But listen, it's one of the most important parts of your life and of your spiritual journey. But don't just take it from me or take it from Dr. Phil or Oprah. Why don't you take it from the designer of the human life himself? From God, who designed human beings and all of life and knows how they're best meant to work. Real quick, here's 3 ways we know that God highly values rest and that was wired into how we are wired up. First, God himself modeled it. You go all the way back to the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, the creation story. God created, you know this, for 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. Now, why in the world did God rest? Does God really get tired and worn out? No. I believe God rested because he is setting the example for all of creation that things are meant to not go nonstop. They're meant to rest. Plants and the ground are meant to rest. A lot of people have been commenting during quarantine time how beautiful it is to see things get a chance to rest. Animals are meant to rest. And yes, human beings that God would then create are meant to rest. So God himself modeled it. I know you probably heard a lot about finding balance in life. And I used to work hard at that. How do I find the right balance? But I read something a few years ago that changed how I think about it. And it's that, what if life isn't so much about balance as it's about rhythm? You know, that we're just going to have seasons of life that are just busier, but then we're meant to have a rhythm of rest. And so for God, it was, work, rest. Work for 6 days, rest. And so the rhythm of our life is meant to have rest. The second reason we know it's so important to the designer of us as humans is that God commanded it. You look in Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments, and I know you've heard of the 10 Commandments, and, they get joked about a lot, using God's name in vain, not coveting things. Right there, number 4 on the list of the 10 Commandments is all about rest, keeping the Sabbath holy. In fact, it's the first time God ever called anything holy. And it's number 4 on the top 10 list of ways to guide our lives to get the most out of the human experience. Right there is rest. And we are meant to experience it. And I always think about this, that how come of all the 10 Commandments, and I know not a lot of people are really taking seriously any of them these days, but how come rest is the one where most likely, even Christians, people in churches too, are most likely to just kind of write off? Is rest, right? That's the one we kind of laugh, go, old-fashioned. Easy for those people to say way back then. They're not as busy as we are now. I got texts and emails and jobs, multiple jobs, and we all got so much going on. That's not really a realistic one that God expects us to keep anymore. And I think about, man, God was so smart, because imagine how many, not all of them, but how many of our culture's problems would go away or decrease if we took seriously rest? How many of yours would? How much of our physical health, our mental health, and our emotional health is better when we're living an actual rhythm of rest, valuing it to the level that God did? So there you go, it's in 10 Commandments. Here's third reason, all right? It's because Jesus himself did it. He was God with skin on, so he was God showing us how to live the human life, and he highly valued rest. You can read in Mark 1 and really through all the stories of his life. Often it says Jesus, and listen, he was as busy as any of us. Lots of demands, lots of pressure, lots of people feeling disappointed if he goes away to rest. And you know what we read he did often? Went away by himself to rest. It's cool, by the way, you can read Jesus liked to rest in gardens and in the mountains. Some of you like those places, places of rest. And I promise you, Jesus turned off his phone, by the way, when he went to rest. So he shut out all the distractions and went and rest. He says, by the way, in Mark 2, he goes, by the way, Sabbath, remember that one in the 10 Commandments? He goes, listen, man wasn't made for Sabbath. It's not some rule that we have to keep or else God gets mad. He says Sabbath was made for people. It was made for you. It's a gift to you, and it was made for your health. And then the best news ever, he says in Matthew 11, he says, come to me and I will give you rest. And that's so different than how so many of us picture God. We think he says, come to me and I will give you rules of religion and lay more burdens on you. And he says, come to me, especially when you're weary, and I'm going to give you real rest. So what does that mean for us? Well, I want you to know this, and I'm really preaching it to myself because I'm just being super honest. I do struggle with burnout at times. Rest doesn't come easy for me, but I've worked hard on it and studied it a lot. Is that I've learned this: God is never calling you to burn out. It's better by myself. Carter, if you're burnt out, it means you're not doing something right. You're missing something God wants you for your life. So I say that to you: is if you burn out, then you're missing something. That's not what God wants. And I love this quote, a guy named John Mark Comer, great author. Check it out. He says, keeping a Sabbath is an act of defiance and rebellion against the endless, restless grind of workaholism and consumerism. So if you're a rebel, then I say, you know what? Go rebel against the workaholism and consumerism and rest, because rest is actually an act of defiance. Rest reminds me I'm enough, God's enough. I'm valuable not because of what I produce, but simply because of who I am. That's why we need rest. So my challenge for you, be intentional. Here's the rhythm I've tried to find for myself. Rest daily. All right, so every day, find out how to rest. Sabbath weekly, set aside one day for you. For me, it usually isn't Sundays because I work on Sundays. But for me, it's been my Mondays, and now in quarantine season, I've had to change it to Saturdays. But find what is that day of rest for you. All right, rest weekly, and then retreat regularly. How do we get away for longer times of rest? I know vacations have been tougher in this season, but it's coming, so be ready to plan your next one, all right? And my last challenge would be, you got to work to find what's truly restful for you, especially like in this quarantine season. Some of the things I used to do that were restful, I'm not allowed to do. So I've had to find new things that are truly restful, not just zoning out in front of the TV, not just working out, and some of you do that because it feels very refreshing, but also find things that just give you deep rest, all right? Listen, you're allowed. You can go tell your boss, you can go tell your spouse that God said you're allowed to take a nap. If you're going to tell your spouse, though, that means you better give them time to take a nap. And also, you better tell your kids that you're allowed to take a nap, because otherwise it's not going to work. All right? God gives you that permission. I'll leave you with these awesome words of Jesus, Matthew 11. I mentioned earlier in the Message version, he says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burnt out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me. You'll learn to live freely and lightly. Have a restful weekend.